And if you want to mix a neutral gray for your background, if you take your ultramarine, your pyrrole red, and your new gamboge, and because these are primary colors, if you mix them, and you have to experiment with this, you can get a more neutral gray, you can get a more violet gray, you can get a darker gray. So learning how to mix neutrals out of your three primaries that you're using is very important. And that's something we teach in color theory, but I'll show my class how to do it. And you can determine how light or dark you want your background to be by how much you mix in the dark, the ultramarine, the pyrrole red, and the yellow. So there you have it. We've done our value study. We are ready to paint. I have wet the artichoke. I've mixed up my colors. The colors we're using today are ultramarine blue, new gamboge, lemon yellow, pyrrole red, and our background was made with ultramarine, pyrrole red, and new gamboge to make a nice gray blue neutral. So if I want a brighter green for this down here, I'm going to add the lemon yellow with the ultramarine because it's brighter. The new gamboge gives us more of an earthy green. And of course, this is all a bit brighter in here. Our first layer is just a soft wash. That basically just establishes our values. In any place we want a darker value. That was just lemon yellow and ultramarine blue. We're just going to add this in too. All right, we've got a darker, oh, we lost our bud over here. We'll just put it in like that. So anywhere that and I've already masked this out. So anywhere I see a mid-value green, I will put in here. And just charge that with water so we don't have any hard edges. And the brighter green we see at the top where the sun is hitting the actual leaves. So I'm just using my other painting as a guideline. And it'll never be the same when you paint the same subject. Every time you paint the subject, it's going to change. And that's what makes it fun to paint. So we're just laying in these lighter lights and the darker darks where we see them. And putting in the green. And always and generally in watercolor, we paint light to dark. So we start with the lighter colors. And everywhere I'm just touching in some green. And it may not end up being there when we're finished, but it will be there initially. All right. So let's add some more of let's go in with our darker greens now. Just touch those in. I like to put my darks in early. Even though we generally paint light to dark, I like to know where my darks are going to be. And that's partially from painting in oil. I learned the importance of putting in your darks early. And all we're doing is defining these petals or leaves. I guess they're leaves with artichoke. And this is our initial wash, so it's quite loose. Some darks. And you know there are always darks between the leaves, so we can put those in. And it's important to try to connect your darks when you're painting so that you have symmetry in your paintings. And also, if you drop in the darks early on, then you're able to define the shape and the form of what you're painting, which is important, of course. And if you're doing it wet, you see it's real easy just to carry it down. All right, and we're going right in with the violet, right even into this wet wash. And everywhere that we want to touch in some violet, we're going to touch that in. Everywhere that I see violet. And this, of course, is just the first layer. And that violet was made with ultramarine blue and pyro red. And if I want it to wash up into the petals, just paint in the direction that you want the water to flow. Very pretty. This is a fun, loose little painting, just to give you an idea. Dropping in everywhere that I see that violet. And carrying it down a little bit, just with the tip of your brush. So we have a symmetry here. And once you lay in this, you get finished with this wash, let it dry completely. Oh, that's nice. All right, I think that initial wash is good. We're gonna let this dry, or you can dry it with your hair dryer. Just be careful with the masking fluid that you don't dry it, that you don't get that masking fluid too hot. And we will be back and work some more on this. Okay, that's dry, and I'm just mixing up some more of the violet. This is a warm violet. So logically, we add a little more pyro red to the mix than the ultramarine to get this nice warm violet color. And I use a mixing brush to mix my paints. I don't mix with my good brushes. This is the mixing brush I use. It is a Princeton Neptune. It's a synthetic squirrel hair brush that I mix everything with. I'm going to turn this upside down for the reason that I want the darks to be put in first. And now this is, I'm putting this in dry. It's called wet on dry, which means we are, and you know what, I can turn this over like this as well to make it easier for you to see. So everywhere there's a dark, I'm just going to drop in this, where there's a dark violet, I'm going to drop it in. Remember, we're always painting form. I'm leaving this quite wet, this mixture wet. And to soften, before this dries, I'm just going to go in with the green and charge it right in to that violet. And if you need to keep up where you are, it's easy just to mark it with your finger. And you can soften an edge by just wetting it like this, keeping that edge wet. We're just adding more value here. And let's get a brighter green in there. Just painting one petal at a time. All right, let's get our green over here before that edge gets too harsh. Let's get our violet. And it's okay with a loose wash like this to paint the petals that are next to each other. Normally, I would jump around, but in this situation, because we're doing the soft, we're doing all the soft petals, it's fine to go ahead and just, and we want this to actually blend together a bit, because in nature, the violets and the greens often mingle. And actually, when they mix, they make a very pretty color. So, just trying to keep this. If you don't want them to mix too much and you don't want it to be muddy, you just have to keep cleaning your brush. And you see, because we're painting in this direction, everything is softening as it goes down, which is really nice. Don't be afraid to change your paintings, to turn your paintings around, to make it easier for you. Okay, we've lost a little definition there. That's fine. Okay. That is not green there, so, I mean, that's not violet there, that's green. And a brighter green. For some reason, these are brighter down here, the actual sepals, I guess. These are the sepals. And we've got quite a dark green right there. In here. I'm going to let that just bleed on down. Okay, we've got a green edge on this. There. All right. Now, if I weren't using a limited palette, I would be using this color called Leaf Green, which you can see is quite bright, but it's the perfect color to use that. But since we are doing a limited palette, we'll just make that green with the yellow and a tiny bit of ultramarine blue. And that's pretty close. This time we'll paint it this way, just to make it a little more vivid. And we always blending it so it's not too much of a contrast there. So we want to add this color somewhere else in our painting. That's continuity. Just want to be sure we're always having continuity in our paintings. And if you get too much, just blot it out. If you think that's too much. Just here and there. Just where the light might be hitting the tips. You always need to be paying attention where the light source is coming from. So we can establish that. Keeping the petals soft. Adding some texture. The best way to do that is just with a very light touch of your brush. Okay, let's put some darker green in here and these darker areas. If you want to bring something forward, you just put a darker color behind it. And that will give you the illusion of form. And it's always darker up in here underneath the petals, of course. There's going to be shadows. And this is very dark right there. All right. Softening that. Okay, so now we're going to let that dry. The key to not overworking your paintings is to dry them between each layer. Unless you're painting true wet on wet, and then you have to adjust for that. So we are going to dry this. I've learned that from watching my students, if they stop and dry their paintings, they are much less likely to overwork a painting. So keep that in mind.